the intention here was not only to ask, do you agree to prioritize this action or not, but also make a small, in a sense, reality check and ask our respondents, do you think that this action contributes to the competitiveness of the EU economy, or do you think that it can have high emission cuts, or do you think that could be successfully implemented by the suggested end date? Of course, we were not looking for extremely accurate answers, but we want to see if our respondents will find the ideas in the report to be solid, more or less solid. And indeed, like as you see here for the whole energy system, most of our respondents strongly agreed to prioritize these research innovation actions in the report. They also agreed with the competitiveness aspect of them and the emission cuts, and they would believe that it's more or less likely to achieve them. Like on this, the high-level report had also a small part that had some roadmaps that also gave some some end dates on this. So this is what we asked our respondents on, if they believe these end dates would be realistic or not. As you see, some of the priorities did not get, not all priorities got the same support level. So you see here the second priority about a full-scale demonstration of carbon-neutral, carbon-negative liquids and gaseous fuels received less support than the rest. But still, in comparison to disagreements, the support level is still quite high. Of course, as you understand, I cannot go into full detail about the results, but you can find the detailed results in the report of the survey results in DEEDS. So on our website, deeds.au/results. But overall, we saw that most respondents were supportive of almost all sector-specific priorities, and that they believe that it could contribute to economic competitiveness, deliver high emission cuts, and be delivered by their suggested end dates. Of course, there was a bit of, there was quite some variation there, and in the next two slides, I'm going to show you this. So I'm going to show you here the priorities that they had the highest support. So you can see here, these are related to power sector. So you see, we see a lot of blue answers, in a sense, a lot of support here. So it's related with power sector, priorities related with urban zero carbon mobility, circular economy in industry, agriculture, smart cities, upscaling social innovation, and cross-country and cross-sectoral partnerships. Here we have on the right the priorities with the lowest support, and these are related, as we also saw in the previous slides, with carbon-neutral fuels, biomass, with bioenergy with carbon capture and storage, the digitalization for the energy sector, and public-private partnerships. Again, as I said before, it's not that these priorities received I mean, they didn't receive really a negative answers. They were not, people were not disagreeing with them. It was mostly that they were not supporting as much as the other ones. So now, of course, as you realize from the sample size and the sample characteristics, this is not, these results, they don't represent the whole of Europe. They don't represent all the sectors of Europe or the fields there. But for us, for DEEDS, they serve as insights to further explore, both in DEEDS, but also in future horizon projects. Some insights here. There's a small recap of what I said also before. So we can look at priorities that receive the least consensus, like public-private partnerships, looking more in measures for international cooperation in research innovation, and also looking in some of the stakeholder suggestions, like, for example, the Transition-Superlabs in tourism industry. And future DIT activities that this will happen. There is a workshop in May 2020 in Brussels about research innovation strategies for the member states in the EU. So it will be also in a bit of a policy level. Then we also have our final conference again in Brussels in June. And we're also going to release within this year policy briefs and business guide, a guide that will explore some of these insights, but also other aspects that came with workshops, that came with other activities from DIDS, and will be providing with policymakers and business people with the information needed to apply all the things that we learned in this project and all the things that were in the high-level panel report. More information about future activities from DIDS you can find also in our website. So yeah, that's it from me. This is a small recap for our findings, like for the questions, and yeah, I'm looking forward for your questions. Also, Maria, if she would like to join for some of them, be also nice. Yeah, thank you.
Great, thank you, George. We actually have a couple of questions in the Q&A box already. I think the first two are maybe they came up in the last from the last discussion, but I guess if there's any of those that you feel you'd like to answer.
Yes. I'm only trying. I'm sorry. I'm trying to open the Q&A box. So sorry for this. There's more.
That's okay.
Technical issue. So I'll just stop sharing if that's all right for now.
In the time while you have a look at that, we can run the polling maybe.
Yeah, that would be good. Yeah? Yes, thank you.
Okay. So here we have the next set of questions. And the first question is about if you all think that we should prioritize the digitalization of the energy sector, and if yes, when we should achieve it. So okay, if we just have about another 10 to 15 seconds on this one, and then we'll move to the next question. Okay, and so the next one, should we prioritize the BECCS or public-private partnerships? And if yes, when should we achieve it? Oh, the years haven't come up there, unfortunately. So I guess, yeah. Okay, and now we'll move to the next one. Okay, this is the last question on this one. So survey respondents suggested to create Transition-Superlabs in touristic areas with a lot of hotels and resorts and high carbon footprints. To what extent do you agree with this suggestion? Okay, we'll have about another 30 seconds on this last question, and then we can go to the Q&A. Okay, so that will be that. And George, are you happy to go to the some questions now? Okay, great.
Yes, definitely. I see them already. So I think I'm going to ask from Jan, Helen. I'm going to also read the question. So establishing a lab for transition in a country which actively promotes policies hindering transition does not seem to be such a super solution in my mind. Well, I'm not, I have some ideas of what the country could be, but I cannot mention it here. I think the idea is that, at least to my understanding, it's also related a bit with your European Green Deal, that you would be, there will be money provided. There will be also like Transition-Superlabs. You can think of it as a measure provided in order to promote a just transition. And of course, as Maria said, some of the issues, especially of distrust, for example, from the people or maybe from the regional governments, it's something that the priority should be solved in a regional level, let's say. So to move forward to Jeremy Miller, thank you for your question. So question is like that the focus has been on soils as carbon sinks, but tree planting, ecosystem diversification is more important. In the report, there is also quite some emphasis on this aspect. It's just that our respondents, and maybe this is also that came up also a bit of my prior presentation, is that most of our respondents were not agreeing about the carbon sinks aspects. Actually, they were actually fully agreeing with the tree planting aspect of the report. So I think this was also suggested, and also, of course, bear in mind that this report was out in 2018, and as Maria said, there are also new things coming in and new science coming in, and this needs to be taken into account into updating some of the findings in the sense of the report, and that's also what DEEDS was doing and is doing, like in its work. Moving to Raul's question, thank you for your question. So, in relation to the exploration of support for public-private partnerships, you explore why people support to refuse them. Yeah, that's the issue. That in the survey, we wanted to get a bit of a helicopter view of what's things are controversial and what's not. So, unfortunately, because of time, of course, issues, it turned out to be a very big survey. In the end, we couldn't ask for more details. But that's something that was explored further in workshops. So there were workshops for each of the 7 sectors. You can find the results. They have been already like last year, and the reports with the results are out already in the DEEDS website. I think there is a reference on public-private partnerships there as well. So you can go for more details also there. To go to Adeline's question, so the metrics.
Sorry, I just want to say, yeah, that will that can be that would be the last question, and then we'll have to move on to the next presentation. Yeah, yep. Thanks.
So the metrics used to assess low carbon or zero carbon among the respondents. Yeah, it's. In a sense, this was also something that is related with the report, because the idea of the report is, as Maria said, is like to move to zero carbon solution as fast as possible. But in some cases, also low carbon solutions were suggested. And in most of the questions that we had to the respondents, we kept the same framing as in the report. So we had this low carbon, zero carbon, let's say, connection only in the short-term priority, so only until 2025. And for most of the other ones, it was clear that mostly it was about zero carbon measures. Yeah, I think it's, fortunately, we don't have that much time until now. Maybe in the end of the webinar, if we have more time, we can move to the further questions.
Yeah, that would, it would be good to come back to some of these if we do have the time at the end. And now, but for now, we'll go back to, or go over to Miguel, if you'd like to share your screen now, so we can all see your presentation. And I think you're still on mute.
Can you hear me now? Hello?
Oh, hi, we can hear you.
Hello, you can hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. First of all, I would like to thank you for the presentation, for the invitation to participate. I don't really know if I am seeing the, okay. Can you see my presentation? Okay, because I have, but I don't see it in my, what do you mean? I have an issue. Okay, now I would like to start by thanking you, giving you a brief introduction of my company. I will provide you with a positive perspective on the European Green Deal, and I will use my background as a representative of Iberdrola, a utility company. Most of you maybe know it. It is a company focused on renewable energy sources that is focused on onshore and offshore wind. And we provide service for more than 100 million people. That's some of the important notes that I want to make before starting my presentation, because it will be very useful to understand my point of view on the Green Deal. We see Green Deal not only as a climate issue, as a climate plan, but as a economic roadmap, an economic roadmap for the whole European context. As you can see in this diagram, this contains a climate law, some plans for energy decarbonization, circular economy issues, agricultural issues. Across all elements of the Green Deal, we see that climate action is at the center of this transformation. We will see it more clearly in the next slide. If we see the roadmap, the related policies to implement this Green Deal, we see that in January...
Sorry to interrupt, Miguel. I haven't been able to find a point. Would you mind just putting it onto a full screen, because the smaller text is quite difficult to read on our screens at the moment.
Can you read it better now? Okay.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. What we see is that in January, there is a mistake here. In January 2020, a just transition mechanism was sent to involve all the society, to engage all the stakeholders with this transition to a low carbon economy. A sustainable finance plan was also launched in January 2020. And now it's been a very interesting debate on the European climate law that will be launched the 4th of March, and also in the European Climate Pact. The European industrial strategy, also to the focus on decarbonizing, especially hard to abate industrial sectors, will be launched also in March. Across summer, there will be an impact assessment on the 2030 decarbonization goal. As you may be aware, this will be a debate on the refurbishment, on the renovation of the NDC, European Climate Plan that is presented for Paris to meet with Paris Agreement. So we are talking about very important climate elements, but all these climate elements, climate goals, will reshape the European economy in some sense. For the coming months in 2020, I don't want to go in further detail because I don't have time, but you will see that there will be news in taxation, there will be news in the European trading scheme, some programs for batteries, offshore wind. You can have more detail in the communication of the Green Deal, but I think it's important to flag that this is something, this project, this political project, that will reshape, that will touch upon all the sectors of economy. I will summarize some of the main elements of the plans that has already been released. Here we have the Sustainable Investment Plan. It was launched in January, as I said, and it will try to mobilize 1 trillion euros across the decade until 2030. We see that more or less half of this money will come from the public budget, and a very slight part will come from the allocations from the auctions of the European ETS scheme. All this money will be allocated through different areas. Part of the Just Transition mechanism, 100 billion, but other income streams or money streams will come through the European Investment Bank or through the program InvestEU, that it is a program that was launched in 2018 to promote through guarantees mainly different projects, environmental projects, social projects. We see that it's a huge amount of money, but it's still to be seen how it is finally allocated. Now the long-term budget, the multi-annual financial framework is being discussed in Brussels, so we will have to see how it works. Other important element that was released in January was the Just Transition mechanism. It is more or less 100 billion euros for the period 2021-2027, and it will be developed through three main blocks. The first block is the so-called Just Transition Fund. 7.5 billion euros from the EU budget will be used to renew or to dynamize regions with social, economic problems, regions that were mainly focused on high emission intensive activities or with coal mining. Especially these regions will be beneficiaries of this money. Some preliminary allocations has been shown with Poland and Germany leading the allocations, but I understand that this money will be complemented as the regulation, the proposal regulation has said, will be complemented with social and regional funds, and so finally it could mobilize almost 30 or 50 billion euro, 7.5 billion euro of public budget, but it could mobilize, it could leverage more money, as you can see here. The Just Transition scheme is the second big block. It is more focused on guarantees that the European Investment Bank or other public institutions could leverage. And the third block is focused on help to municipalities and regions to provide this money for projects to dynamize areas, regions in trouble for this transition. The Just Transition mechanism is one of the main political tools that the Commission is using to engage all the economic sectors on this. These two elements have been released. As I have said, now there is a consultation. It has been just closed to draft the European climate law on net zero emission and also the climate pact. I don't include slides on this, but I would like to highlight that it's very important to count with a European climate law. As Vice President Timmermans said some weeks ago in an event in Brussels on this climate law, a climate law is important in terms of governance, because if we have in law the net zero emissions goal, it will be very useful for EU members to align their policies, to align their regulations with this European goal. As a company, as a utility company that is fully aligned with Paris Agreement, we see this transition, this political project, as an opportunity. I include here some figures from the European Commission, mainly from the EU long-term emission reduction strategy that was presented in November 2018. We see that a lot of investment will have to be done to meet with the goals. 260 billion euro of additional investments will be necessary to meet 2030 goals, current 2030 goals. If we increase this emission reduction goal by 2030, we will have to invest more. We see, according to European Commission figure, that renewables are the main drivers, and electrification is an essential part of this driver. If we want to meet long-term strategy goals, net zero emission goal by 2050, we should reach almost 90% of renewables in the electricity sector in Europe by 2050. We will have to transform also mobility. In the previous presentations, we have had very interesting ideas on this issue. We should evolve towards a more dynamic, sustainable, multimodal transport sector in Europe. That will involve charging infrastructure, digitalization, smart grids. We should transform also buildings. Buildings represent more than 40% of energy consumed in Europe. Heating and cooling in the building sector, refurbishments, renovations will be key, and it will involve business opportunities. Industry is a key part of this political project. We will have to wait until the European strategy is released next month, but I can advance you that hard-to-abate sectors will play a key role. There will be instruments focused on industry, but also cross-cutting instruments like taxation, carbon border adjustments that will be put on the table by the European Commission to foster European industry. We are talking about the positive side, but we could also talk about the negative impacts that would be avoided under an ambitious climate approach. And the European Commission in the Green Deal website has included these impacts that I have highlighted here. Pollution, the reduction of pollution would involve a reduction in premature deaths. Also, we should see some reductions in terms of flooding, water problems, heat waves. Tackling climate change and having a success in this challenge will avoid very negative impacts that can be quantified, and some examples are illustrated here according to the own figures of the European Commission. Some of them are based on previous research from the World Health Organization or IPCC. They are gathering other impact assessments for these figures. What we see is that in this side, in the opportunities area, the EU energy system is critical, and we have to tackle this. It is the origin of 75% of emissions, and we should tackle it. Electricity, and I work in an electricity company, that's the reason why it's very positive for me to see this. We see that electrification is a key part of this. We see that there are currently very efficient, very competitive solutions, especially in the renewable side, offshores, onshore, solar, pumping, hydro. There are very competitive solutions, generation technology that can almost fully decarbonize electricity sector in the coming years. So if we combine these solutions within the electricity sector with the demand side, with the trends in electrification, we can provide a very optimistic perspective on the decarbonization of the EU electricity sector. I think we could be positive on this regard. I will illustrate this idea with some of the data that we are managing internally. We can see here the robust reduction of the solar PV cost, almost 300-fold reductions in the early 70s. We can see this reduction in the cost of renewable energy technologies analyzing the auctions. We here have some examples. We can see how since 2011 auctions for solar PV projects their cost has been reduced by 90%. In wind onshore, we see that these auctions have reduced their cost by 78%, and in wind offshore, more than 70%. This is real. These are data that have been released in public reports from these projects across different jurisdictions. Regarding a very important element for the sustainability of transport sector, electric vehicle, we can see also some interesting perspectives. This graph shows how the cost of especially the battery of the electric vehicle is being reduced, and how cost parity could be reached by 2023 according to these trends. We see that combustion engine, the conventional vehicle will maintain more or less its cost, but electric vehicle will be reducing, especially the battery part, will be reducing its cost in the coming years. And we are making this analysis without taking into account a lot of externalities that could be included in energy prices and that currently are not included in the taxation frameworks, in the prices of the economy. So it could be earlier even if we included these externalities. Of course, there are opportunities. Of course, we as an energy sector company see that it could bring enormous amounts of investment, of business opportunities. But we need, as stakeholders, as investors, we need policy frameworks. And we are participating in this debate, in this dialogue with the rest of the stakeholders in Europe. I will focus on what we see that is necessary, at least in the context of the climate law. The climate law is one of the main initial elements of the Green Deal, as I have said. And we think it is very important, this law, to include the net zero emission target by 2050 as a regulatory element that will be essential. This will be essential to enforce this goal politically across all Europe. But not only do we need 2050 target, we need intermediate targets. And this law should include intermediate targets aligned with climate neutrality by 2050. We need goals by 2030. We need to increase the ambition in the European NDC by 2030. Of course, the law will be very general. It cannot be a detailed document with a lot of regulations, but at least some general guidelines, some robust guidelines should be included regarding cross-cutting policies, such as taxation, environmental tax reform, and environmental tax reforms should be launched to include the polluter pays principle in the taxation directives. There should be some general guidelines to promote industrial sector roadmaps aligned with this net zero emission goal. Fair transition, we have the Just Transition Fund, the Just Transition Mechanism, but it will be necessary to work more on this, to provide general guidelines, to include in the climate laws some robust mechanism to advance more. Other general elements should be included, as I say here, regarding R&D policies, policy instruments to develop good practices, product processes. And beyond the law, we see that also it will be very important, but we don't have much information because I think it is internally discussed within the Commission services, the European Climate Pact. We need a European Climate Pact that engages all the stakeholders, that allows us to participate in a dialogue with the Commission, with the NGOs, with the regional governments, in a conversation to find a common frame of solutions for this huge challenge. As a closing remark, I would like to highlight that as a company, we have been supporting this net zero emission goal since 2 or 3 years ago publicly in all the policy debates. And we see this as a source of opportunities. We think this can have a huge amount of economic benefit for the European economy, but clear and predictable policy frameworks are needed. But at the end of the day, we don't have other option as Europe. We have to make a very ambitious approach for this goal. And this is all from my side.
Thank you. I guess are you able to see the questions? There's been a couple that have come up. If you click on the Q&A button.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What the European? I think I'm seeing the old ones.
If you scroll right down to the bottom.
Okay.
There's one that says, "Won't fuel cell tech overtake EVs with batteries?" And of course, can you see that one? Derived from renewables as being a much more efficient storage solution, a quicker refueling times. Also, fuel cells have...
Fuel cell tech overtake EV with batteries. Of course, the different renewables have been... Our perspective regarding fuel cell tech overtake EV with batteries. According to our internal and also our prospective analysis in collaboration with some think tanks and also our assessment of International Energy Agency evolution and prospective reports, we see that in the coming years, electric vehicles, direct electrification will be much more competitive than fuel cells. I think, and I am not a technology expert, but what I see is that fuel cells or hydrogen could be a very interesting vector for freight transport or for those modes of transport in which direct electrification has more trouble because of the logistics, because of the characteristics of the mode. But I don't see in the coming years fuel cells more competitive than direct electrification through electric vehicle. Do you believe that current technologies will be sufficient to achieve full society? Although we need them. Of course, we have to count on all the solutions, on a wide range of solutions to meet with the net zero emission goal. The net zero emission goal is a huge challenge. If we follow the IPCC report on 1.5 scenario, and even the European Commission communication on the EU emission reduction long-term strategy, we see that we have to count on all the solutions, even negative emission solutions. If we want to achieve net zero emission, we will have to take definitely all the technologies on board, yeah.
Okay, there was also a question earlier that we didn't have time for. It was, don't you think the fundamental issue of decarb is polluter pays? Just like in any other sector, the regulation of carbon companies should insist on zero carbon, and they will find, as they have the resources and the expertise, a big move and can only be done at the EU and UN level. I don't know if that... I guess it's more about polluter pays, maybe. Yeah,
I have some question. There is other question related. Maybe I can gather some of them regarding carbon tax. No, with the carbon density interested during the carbon tax, and your opinion about the carbon tax, please. What I think is that in general, that if we want to decarbonize EU economy, we will have to use all the policy tools that we have. Carbon pricing is one of the main tools, not the only one, but is one of the most important. So I would support personally to have a carbon price signal across all sectors of economy. We have now the carbon price signal mainly in the ETS sectors, industry, energy, but we should promote a spread of this carbon signal through taxation, through ETS refurbishment to the rest of the sector, transport, residential, etc. This is very important. And of course, we think that a polluter pays principle should be included in the new taxation regulation. I think that by 2021, there will be a refurbishment of the taxation directive, and I think this principle should be reinforced in the new proposals. So if we support the net zero emission, we have to support these ambitious policy frameworks. We have to do it.
Okay. Are there any Adele's question, do you believe current technologies or close to market technologies will be sufficient to achieve full society decarbonisation, or do we need to develop new ones for deep carbonisation, for example, negative emission technologies?
Yeah.
And Maria also touched on this in her presentation.
Yeah, I think that with current, the challenge is huge. And we, in the electricity sector, we have an advantage in the sense that there are available a lot of technologies to decarbonize electricity sector, and they are quite competitive, quite mature. So it's true that in the electricity sector, we have this wide range of available technologies, and it is more or less easy to proceed. But it's also true that if in other sectors, it is more difficult, and there should be an exploration of different technologies. And also maybe we should focus on R&D and innovation to make more widespread some technologies and to increase the competitiveness of other technologies. But I would be optimistic, and I would say that combining renewables energies, energy efficiency, and electrification, we could at least achieve 80% of the decarbonization that we need. The rest, of course, should come from other solutions like carbon capture and storage, natural-based solutions, other areas. But most of the decarbonization would be viable with the current technologies, under my point of view.
So sorry, I was muted there. I guess for, I would just bring in, there's one last question that I thought we could talk about, which is the role of liquid biogas and the role of biofuels, if we think that if they will still be significant over the next few years, and particularly Jen has asked in the transport sector.
Yeah, I think that all these issues are now very subject to a very intense debate in Europe. I see the questions are focused on this area. I'm not an expert in technology, I'm a policy expert, but what I see in my reading, in my debates with some colleagues that are experts on this, is that liquids, cell propulsion, all this will have a role in the decarbonization of transport sector, but it will be in those areas of transport that have special needs, as I said, freight transport or other special context. I don't see them as a widespread dominant solution for the decarbonization of transport, but it is my personal perspective.
Okay. I guess with that, we can move to the last set of polling questions, and then we'll probably just be out of time. I was hoping to get another round of questions in, but I don't think we will. So first we'll go to the next lot of polling. So in a general assessment on the EU Green Deal, what is the main element of the proposal under your point of view? So this is a question that, these are a set of questions that Miguel's put to us about of achieving climate neutrality, a just transition, the transformation of agriculture in rural areas, or clean, reliable and affordable energy, and preserving Europe's natural capital, if there seems to be what the views are. Okay, I'll leave this question up for another 30-ish seconds, then all the questions have had about a minute on. In the meantime, maybe we can, Miguel, maybe you can answer the question, or Maria or George, if you have an opinion on biomethane, should it be treated or taxed as a fossil fuel or as a renewable fuel?
I don't know if I can say, like, I think it's a very big discussion, like to be answered in a simple yes, yes and no. But I think there are discussions of these exactly aspects, like to take it into account as a renewable fuel. I think, though, the biggest debate would be mostly with other kinds of technologies. They're a bit more vocal recently, like, for example, nuclear. Like that for some countries, it was important to be there. But for biomethane, from my opinion, I would say that this probably should be like a renewable fuel. But as I said, it's a matter, I think, of debate and in general on this aspect. I don't know if Maria wants to add something.
While we're waiting, maybe we can go to the next question, which is, do you think a net zero economy is feasible by 2050? I guess it's a net zero, it should have been a net zero carbon economy. Okay, and now we have the last question coming up, which is, which policy asks would you raise to EU policymakers of the, so intermediary targets, environmental tax reform based on the polluter pays principle, industrial sector roadmaps, fair transition, RD&I policies, policy instruments to promote the development of practices, products, processes, and technologies. And I'll leave that up again for another 30 seconds. And while you are all answering that question, I would really like to say thank you to everybody who attended today, and particularly a very big thank you to all our panelists. And I'd like to say thank you in particular to Maria van der Hoeven for sharing the insights from the high-level panel, and to George and Miguel. They're all very different but very interesting presentations from you all. So yeah, thank you very much. If anyone has any more questions or would like more information about the Deeds project, you can go to the website or get in touch with me. My email address has been on all the communications that you've received. So yeah, so thank you very much. And that's it from us now.